Welcome to your latest episode of the Green and White podcast, brought to you by Argyle Life, your award-nominated Plymouth Argyle fans podcast. As you can see on the screen, there is still plenty of time for you to scan that QR code or to visit www.argyle.life. Vote for us in the 2025 Football Content Awards in the Best Club Content Creator Football League category. There aren't too many podcasts around the country that can say that. Joining me tonight are two grown-ups who are going to indulge in some light-hearted conversation as we look to try and keep this as level-headed as possible and bring some rationale and some sane opinions to what is going on as we try and piece together just how the hell this has unraveled in 24 months. I'm not going to sit here and tell people how they should feel. None of us are. We all feel in different ways about the current situation. One thing we are confident of, however, is this is a circus act right now. We are sitting in 22nd in League One after being relegated from the Championship last year. We lost 43 games across 2 seasons. We've lost another 9 already this year, and we're not even trick-or-treating. Unbelievable. Sam Down, you were one of the 700 you were one of the 700 stupid souls who travelled to Mansfield last night to witness a 2-0 defeat on the road. Why don't you give us a Sam Down style run through of that cluster?
Yeah, it was another, I'm not going to mince a word, another absolutely shocking performance, bar a 20-minute spell in the second half, which we will come to. Actually, the first literally 2 or 3 minutes were okay. We had the ball in the half, got a corner, the corner came to nothing, and they got a goal kick, and that was about as promising as it looked all evening, really. Obviously, from the goal kick, we know what happened. We've all watched it enough times. Our three central defenders all looked like they were doing some kind of, bad audition for Strictly Come Dancing, didn't they? They were all sort of getting in the way of each other and bumping into each other. Ross, and what has happened to Ross, by the way, after being an absolute star in September, as you seen in the Wimbledon game and last night, just seemed to drop off a cliff. But Ross completely missed a header. Then Galloway sort of goes for it, doesn't go for it, bumps into Wiradoo. And then we have the total comedy of the air kick, whereby obviously that then lets their man through. A very easy finish at that point of time, and we're 1-0 down. Lots of other chances were had. I think one where Such completely loses his man, and they have a header that goes just wide. And then there was the, again, Wiradoo disaster at the start of the second half, completely loses his man. And again, it just good to know how he doesn't finish. That really was probably quite a high value chance. Thankfully for us, he put it into the side netting, and we kind of stayed in the game at that point. But yeah, there was only one side looked like scoring. They looked far more like going 2-0 up than we did equalising. I think it would be fair to say it wasn't in any way a fluke or a lucky victory. Mansfield were totally the dominant side. I think they looked a lot better than Exeter did against us, and that's not being sour against Exeter, because I'm not really, bothered about Exeter, to be truth. But Mansfield really cut us open like butter at times. You can tell why they're doing well in the league, and fair play to Nigel Clough. He's a manager who I've not always rated particularly highly in his time at Derby, but he's doing an absolutely superb job at that club. And then comes our only good spell of the game. We brought on 3 players, who I think all made, to be fair to all 3 of them, a very positive difference in an attacking sense. One of them was Law McCabe, one of them was Tegan Finn, and the third was Jamie Patterson. And I think we did have a 15-minute spell where we genuinely looked pretty good. Yes, we did still only have probably one clear-cut chance in that time. But it was, we had the ball, we had them penned in, we looked threatening, we actually looked like a team in that 15-minute spell. And then the best chance that would have equalised it. Yeah, it's painful even thinking about it. It was a lovely flick, lovely targeted ball down the pitch. It was a flick inside from, I think, Patterson. It forced Tegan Finn with only the keeper to beat, and I've watched it back. He just doesn't quite get his feet right, doesn't quite wrap his foot around the ball, just scuffs it, miskicks it, and it looked easier to score than miss. But he looked absolutely, the camera showed him after I watched on the rematch, he looked absolutely gutted. He looked like he was kicking himself, but he did make a very positive impact in terms of progressing us forward. And it was just a moment he'll look back on and probably bang his head against the wall. But there we go. Maybe there was a divot in the pitch if we're being charitable, but he still will probably think he should be scoring from there. And then we kind of tail off a bit. We've seen that many times, I think, over the last years of Argyle, whether we're a goal down or 2 goals down, and we have a real fiery run. We look good for a 10, 15-minute spell, and then it just sort of tapers out. And I think that was, again, what we saw. And Mansfield hit us on the counter with the sucker punch. Again, I don't know what Such was doing at all. I thought he had an absolutely dreadful first game back as a right wing back. Not digging him out personally because he's not the only one, but plenty of others have had bad games as well. But he's one I'm mentioning at the moment. And yeah, 2-0, game over. Yeah, we all know what the fans.
Sam, you're forgetting the excellent.
I am. Yes, I am. Yes, there was another good chance. But it was after the game was already gone. It was genuinely a pretty good chance. Again, I think Patterson again primarily creates it. He threads a nice ball through to Finn, who does slip, does lose his footing slightly, but recovers from it really well. There's a little flick to Tolai. So again, mistake, but good recovery from the mistake. Flick to Tolai. Tolai, absolutely lovely ball, by the way, for that. Credit where due. It's a very negative performance, but credit where due to Tolai. It was a lovely ball to Peppel. Finds Peppel in space. Finds Peppel with a bit of time. And I think the ball is still in orbit now, probably colliding with the International Space Station. And yeah, full time, lots of boos, a few fans down the front giving it hell up at full time. Sadly, it's just coming to what you expect, the way it's going at the moment. But yeah, that was, I'll as Joe said, we are being constructive, we are being adult, and we are looking for ways forward. So that's I'll wrap up there, and we'll hand to the people who are going to look at the solutions. Joe and John.
Yeah, that was Sam's run through, and that's all we've got time for tonight. That's all we can be bothered to go through. No, we haven't. Just to let you know, before I come to John, let's give you a little bit more positive news, because there are 2 games going on as we sit here now involving Plymouth Argyle teams, and we're currently unbeaten in both of them, and this is something to enjoy. There are currently 25 minutes on the clock at St James Park in the Devon Derby in the FA Women's National League South, and the women have done better than the men. They've managed to get past the 20-minute mark without conceding. It is currently 0-0 in that clash. And at Home Park in the FA Youth Cup, Argyle are 1-0 up against Mansfield United. Mansfield under 18s in the first round of the FA Youth Cup proper. So that's something that we should all be very happy about. John, you and I were sensible ones last night. We watched the game from the comfort of our own homes. That doesn't mean that we still didn't go through. I don't know. Should we get Sarah on to give us her view whether or not it was sensible for you? But the point is that even though we weren't there, we still went through every emotion as if we were in those stands last night, and this is pretty galling at the moment, isn't it?
I went through one emotion actually, which was anger. I think that was it, really. The one stage of Plymouth Argyle. Look, I think that I again, as I've said on this podcast, I've got the reputation for being the happy clapper for some reason. I don't actually think I am one of those, but that is the reputation that I have. I certainly was the last to come off the fence about both Foster and Rooney, I think, among the people who contribute to the pod. I think I'm right in saying that I was the last on both. And we'll come on to discuss Cleverley's future, I'm guessing, in a little bit. But it's a joke. It's a shambles. You used the word circus. I think personally, I believe that certain people on this podcast, but also certain people in the fan base, had overinflated, unrealistic expectations of our ability to compete in the Championship. I think obviously we should have competed better last season than we did under Rooney, of course. But, I don't think that the period when Rooney had us just outside the relegation zone was some great failure like some people seem to think. And obviously it did really go south even from there and ended up getting us relegated. To be clear, I would not have made the appointment in the first place. But, I think when you're 20th in the Championship with our budget, you could look at that and say, yeah, it's not great. Things could be better, but we're hanging in there. We're competitive. Being in the relegation zone after 14 games, going into the FA Cup first round weekend, and what is probably soon to be for us the second international break, is a disgrace. It's just, it's no other way of dressing it up. I think you could debate whether we should have been realistically looking to bounce straight back up automatically or in the playoffs, or maybe even you could say that sort of having a transitional season, given the turnover that we've had at every level of the club, and finishing 8th or 9th. Would maybe represent an acceptable season. I think that's a debate that you can have. And by the way, I think that sort of latter outcome is not impossible. It's still very early in the season, and I'm not quite as willing as some people on this panel to say that we're already down. But it's the fact that we're even where we are now. And by the way, even after 4 or 5 games, when I was preaching patience, and saying that judgments were being made prematurely, I stand by that. I think it was premature. I think that was what I was saying. I was saying wait and see. I was not saying that we're guaranteed to become world beaters. I was saying that when we've had an entire squad turnover, a manager turnover, off-field turmoil, it's not necessarily. It's certainly wasn't acceptable what was happening at the beginning of the season. But I could sort of see a rationale for it. But then we did turn the corner, and it looked good. And for some reason, we've just regressed into looking like the worst team in the league. And it's just disgraceful. I can't find any other word for it. It's if we were 12th or 13th right now, I'm sure that, again, some people on this panel potentially, but certainly members of the fan base, would be doing their nut, because they wouldn't have obviously the counterfactual of knowing what actually has happened, and they'd be saying, we're not in the playoffs, this isn't good enough, and I think we'd be having a debate about that. But no one can defend the fact we are in the bottom 4 in a league which we've just come down into. With whatever you think of our recruitment aside, a sizable budget for this league. It is embarrassing. And I sat there watching. We started, I guess, okay, in literally the first 2 or 3 minutes. When that goal goes in, I almost couldn't believe it. It's literally, first of all, it's the same goal that we conceded against Exeter. Right, almost right, in terms of 2 defenders colliding with one another and the keeper being in no man's land, although this one I think would be very harsh to blame on Hazard. But obviously it's a different type of finish, but it's the same sort of situation where you've got a ball over the top that two experienced defenders just cannot deal with. And the blooper reel for the goals we've conceded this season already, even last year, I don't think it was this bad over the course of the entire season. We were getting battered last year, but can you remember conceding goals this amateurish? We were getting cut apart by teams that were good teams. And yeah, we conceded some very poor goals. This season, it's like every single goal is let's help you with that by, skying a clearance up into the air from the half, from our own halfway line, and it just drops into our own box and you can just tap it in, sir. Or, it's you watch the, Wiradoo in particular, and I guess I feel a little bit sorry for him because he was not in the starting lineup and he was drafted in at the last minute, which is not great preparation, but come on. I mean, I think I could have made that clearance genuinely. It's a disgrace. It's just an absolute embarrassing, and it sets the tone for the evening. And after that, I was thinking, I don't want to say I was writing us off, because I don't think League One is great. Honestly, I've not been massively impressed by really anyone that we've played. And, I didn't think it was impossible that we could come back into the game. But you just, the longer the first half goes on, you just think, we just don't look at it. We don't look like we're able to cut through them. Whereas Mansfield, I don't think they were brilliant, but when they came forward, they carried a threat almost every single time. They looked dangerous. We just do not look dangerous. We didn't look like we were going to score a goal last night. Then, of course, we nearly did score a goal because their defender made a big mistake. Fair play to Patterson, who did well to pick up on it. I feel desperately sorry for Teagan Finn. And I will say, just as a quick aside, I don't think this is the be all and end all of anything. And I don't think it really matters more than the performance on the pitch or anything like that. But from the video that I received of the full-time recriminations, it looked like 2 of the only players who actually properly fronted up to the away end at the end were Law McCabe and Teagan Finn, who are teenagers.
The 2 teenagers who were the 2 who actually improved us when they came on.
I think, yeah. And there were a couple of others having watched it back who stood there for a minute or so. But the fact that 2 of 4 or 5, 6 players who are standing in front of the away end and fronting up to that abuse are teenagers should tell you everything you need to know about the commitment and balls of the other players. Completely indicative, of what honestly looks like. Genuinely, I can't tell if they are spineless cowards or if they don't care. And I genuinely don't know which one of those two things would be worse at this point, but it is one of the two. It's fucking embarrassing. Sorry.
What? Yeah, apologies. This is a family show. Usually we only have to do that when Aaron's on, so apologies. My issue is I can't remember very quickly before we go on to the individual players. I can't remember 5-day period where we've had 2 such important games around the makeup of our season. When you think of all the emotion, all the passion, all of the pressure that was on Thursday night, and to put in such the abject performance they did in front of the world, albeit not everybody would have been watching League One. There was a lot of European football on. It was available to anybody on Thursday night, an opportunity to see just how good this football club could be. Now, 1,300 in that away end, they showed what this football club can be. Those on the pitch didn't at any point on Thursday night. And we looked at that after the game, and we all thought as supporters that on Tuesday night we were going to see a reaction. We were going to see the character, the heart, the resilience, the personality of this group. We were going to see it shine through. We were going to see a reaction. We were going to see all of that put to one side, and they were going to go out and they were going to apologise in the best way that they can. Seems Elton John was right, though. Sorry seems to be the hardest word, because that first half last night, at times was inexcusable and totally unacceptable. Every time Mansfield crossed the halfway line, I expected the ball nestled in the back of our net. It was a comedy show in terms of defence. And John's right about the goals, the type of goals we're conceding at the moment. I can't remember a professional football team being this bad at the back. Like, we weren't this bad in the division above, and yet we still lost 43 games in 2 years defensively. Yeah, okay, we conceded some bad goals. You think there were 1 or 2 really poor ones against Burnley at home in the 5-0 under Muslich. Think of some of the games under Rooney at Sheffield Wednesday. Some of the goals we conceded there were pretty bad. They weren't on this level. They weren't at this level of poorness from our players.
In like the 2000s, where like every Christmas there'd be like an industry for like an gold gas type blooper tape. I feel like
we're running our own competition.
Tape of them.
It's unbelievable. It really is. But look, the game was done. Back-to-back important games. Back-to-back games.
Joe, can I just say, just quickly,
Sure.
It reminds me a bit of Norwich and Bristol City away last year when you said, can you remember 2 games that had such an import? Obviously, neither of those games are a derby game. Don't at me if you think that Bristol City is a derby for Plymouth Argyle, but not in the same way, certainly. But just in terms of 2 really important games where one was just despicable, and then you think we need a response, and then there's a little bit of a response, but ultimately it's just like the teams do not look capable of responding. It reminds me of that, and that was really a turning point last season, I think, and I think this feels the same.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. You think back to how those 2 games panned out. The only reason we're not sitting here now talking about a bigger defeat in 2 games of 2-0 is because of the calibre of our opposition. Mansfield and Exeter were not good enough to really put that defence to the sword over the last 2 games. That is fact. We should have been out of sight last night with the quality of chances we gave up. And it was the same on Thursday night in the biggest game of them all. There is no defending it. We're going to talk about how we come to fix it in about half hour's time when we give the briefest of brief previews to the FA Cup. But get your thinking caps on in the comments. We'll try and star as many of them as we can. How do we fix it? Not necessarily in time for Saturday, but how on earth do we go to Huddersfield next Saturday in the league where we have 10 days to stew on our league position, how on earth do we go to Huddersfield and turn it around and make us defensively solid? Sam, why don't you talk about the first player that we're going to pick out? I say this most often than not, that we like to talk about a positive or a negative. Let's try not to make these too negative.
You know what? Me and John, I think maybe for the same reason, they've both picked the positive anyway. I think probably because we know it's going to be such a negative pod. Well, kind of, yeah, we'll come to John. Probably because we know it's just going to be such a negative pod in terms of big picture stuff and in terms of analysis of performance. You maybe, just for the sake of not completely making all our listeners miserable, you have to take some positivity where you can. So the positive player I'm going to talk about is Jamie Patterson from the bench. Like I kind of alluded to in my run for, I think he was probably most to thank for that little spell where we looked vaguely like scoring. Like we say, certainly for the Finn chance, he really pressed very well, which is what don't forget, Mudslich was our manager when we signed him. So we signed him to play under Mudslich. He was always in the Championship, known as being a very good pressing player. He was like a really good all-rounder attacking midfielder. He was clearly technical, but a presser as well. And I think in the games we've seen, he's clearly not had much fitness. I don't think he's really done much off the ball, not really pressed too well. Certainly doesn't help me play him as a bloody number 6 or even a number 8, really. But we played him in an attacking role last night off the bench, which is absolutely categorically his best position. And he did press well, obviously pressed the defender, forced the error, and laid it up very nicely for Finn, which, as we know, didn't go to plan. And yeah, although we were 2-0 down, the game was gone. He was very much involved in the Peppel chance as well, laying it to Finn in space, who then found Tolai, who found Peppel. Credit where due, nice bit of creative play. And I think whilst it was a very miserable day, miserable game, miserable atmosphere. One of the things that gave me slight encouragement was the contribution of Jamie Patterson to the bench. And I think we saw a glimmer, just a glimmer, that that's the player we hoped we signed when we signed an experienced Championship stalwart like Jamie Patterson. And hopefully in that more attacking role, and maybe if we've got time before, we do want to be off by 9 when the trade to start, of course, but if we do have time, maybe we can have a little bit more of a chat about what formation we think is best. But if we are going to play anything that involves like a number 10, already, either whether it be a central 10 or even a wide 10, Jamie Patterson put in a very impressive audition. One other slight bright spot was the man who fed a couple of quite threatening long balls into the channel, and that was Owen Dale. I think he had probably his best game yet. From a defensive point of view, he was ropey, but he was less ropey than his counterpart defender on the other side, who is an actual defender. I probably wouldn't have started him there because, as you know, I don't. If we're playing a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3, of course, it was last night. We changed formation again, by the way. We don't do that very often, do we? Lovely to have a plan A. We changed formation again. I would have played Barley Mumba left wing back. As it turned out, he played Barley Mumba in the front 3. But we did play Owen Dale left wing back, and I think Owen Dale had a competent performance. Luckily,
should have been sent off.
Yeah, I'd actually forgotten about that. Oh, yeah, what an idiot. Yeah. Yeah, no, okay. He did have a competent performance. Apart from the fact he very arguably could have been sent off for punting the ball away on a yellow card. That was an act of complete lunacy. I'd forgotten about that until John reminded me. So sorry, there goes the positivity down the Swanee. But that was a really, really daft moment from him. Complete head loss. But that moment of lunacy notwithstanding, I think he had a decent game from left wing back. I think the four players who come out of that with any positivity are Owen Dale, Jamie Patterson, Tegan Finn, and the player who John is about to mention.
I was going to say, John, he's not left you with much, is he?
Well, Lewis had his name up on screen just there in the comments. Law McCabe is who I'm going to talk about. The reason I was sort of shaking my head a little bit when Sam said it's a positive one is it's mostly going to be a negative point, unfortunately. But I will start by touching on McCabe, who I thought made us immensely better when he came off the bench. The difference between a team that looked passive, clueless, didn't really know where to pass the ball, no one kind of running through the lines and trying to make things happen, became a team where that was happening. He did, surge through the lines a couple of times. He looked really assured on the ball. He's a phenomenal player. I don't think it's any surprise at all that we just looked miles better when he came on, because that fits exactly the pattern of us looking very, very good at Burton when he had his best game in an Argyle shirt from the start, us falling off a cliff against Wigan at home, arguably, when he was substituted. Maybe not quite falling off a cliff. I didn't think we were brilliant that day at all, even when he was on the pitch, but certainly were better than after he came off. So that's the positive. Well done, Law McCabe.
And Wimbledon home as well, we were worse when he came off 2 in a row.
I think it is very, very possible we are watching a future England international and certainly a regular Premier League player playing in our team week in, week out, which is a real bright spot in this terrible season. Except we're not watching him play week in, week out, are we? And this is where this becomes a negative point. We complained the other night at great length about Tom Cleverley's utterly baffling decision to leave him out of the squad for the Exeter game, a game in which we did not get a foothold in midfield, where we did not look like we had any clue when we had the ball, where we did not progress it. We had an injury crisis. We had lots of players out, as the club statement, which we'll come on to, said. I think we couldn't fill the bench. And yet our best player was on the bench, despite those conditions. And I think it's mad. It's absolutely mad. And we'll come on to Cleverley, I'm sure, and I'm definitely not a kind of ride or die Cleverley out person just yet. But if you are looking at that as an indication of his judgment, I'm afraid it's really bad. I'm afraid it's really, really bad. If he cannot see that dropping McCabe entirely, but from the first team, it would have been bad enough if he was on the bench against Exeter, was a terrible decision. Not bringing him back in from the start last night and rectifying that and trying to get that much more of a foothold in midfield. I cannot. He clearly is not watching the same game that we are. It's insane to me. Genuinely, completely mad. Maybe there's some off-field stuff that we don't see. That he doesn't rate him, or he doesn't think he's got the legs, or whatever. I don't know. But from what we're
comments about him today, John.
No, I haven't actually.
He said, let me pull it up. Yeah. Another Argyle only, so from Plymouth Live, another Argyle only Law McCabe, the 19-year-old Middlesbrough midfielder, blah, 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 dropped that squad. Cleverley said, he's a lovely footballer technically, but he needs to improve in some other aspects, and I just didn't think tonight was his style of game.
Was that about the Exeter game, or the... I thought you said that about the Exeter game.
I think that was about... No, sorry. I think that was about the Exeter game, actually, looking at it now.
Well, he obviously thought that last night as well, otherwise he'd have started him.
Yeah.
But again, when he came on, we were so much better. And that was a period of the game in which, they had a clear chance and they scored. They did score one of their 2 goals while he was on the pitch. But we had our only clear-cut chance of the game, really, our only really clear chance. Again, he was not exactly involved in that, but I don't think it's any coincidence. But we were just much more
had
on the
the
front
platform
foot
to build on, didn't we? When he was there and he had that control of midfield. And like I always said about wanting to reopen the older, like I always said about our previous number 20, such an underrated skill is the ability to dictate play, control possession in a productive way, find the openings in defence, and just get us that possession and territory higher up the pitch. And even though he wasn't directly involved, that having that midfield as a platform to build on is absolutely huge and it's absolutely critical. And he gives us that positive platform to build on, from which the more attacking players can and do create chances.
And look, he's a young player. I get it. He's very inexperienced. He's right at the beginning of his career. He will make mistakes. I'm sure there'll be games that will pass him by. It's going to happen. But he's really good. And I think he's, to lie, you could have an argument, but I think certainly for McCabe, for his age, is a better player. I think he's going to have a better career than anyone in that squad by a lot, personally. And we have him for this season. And he makes us a lot better. And I just don't get it. I don't understand why he was not in the squad for the Exeter game. But even if you do understand that, and you can make a case for that, and you can say, well, maybe, in hindsight, you can understand why Cleverley wouldn't want to put him in that hothouse atmosphere, etc. To then not do it again, not only in a situation where we have all of our players available, but in a situation where we're completely decimated by injuries and suspensions and, personal absences and all the rest of it. I don't get it. I don't get it.
I would want to add that my mate Connor, who listens to the podcast, who goes on the banana bus with me, thinks me liking McCabe and just me loving like a hipster midfielder who keeps the ball and passes around a bit. And I do have players who I like, who I play up to it sometimes just for humor and not interactions, but to kind of maybe I slightly exaggerate what I think about certain players, just because we all have our views on this podcast and we all like to self-deprecate our own views a bit. But with Law McCabe, it's not like that at all. I agree with John. I think he is really, really good, and I think that the fact of how good he is has been disguised from the team he's been put into. I think if you put him into Cardiff, or maybe not so much Stevenage and Bradford, because they're a bit more, little bit more direct, a little bit more, physical and battling, in midfield. But if you put him but maybe even those two, if you put him into Cardiff, put him into Bolton, maybe put him into Luton now under Wilshere, I think there would be nobody doubting just how good he is. I think how good he is disguised by the team he's in, because, as we said, Burton game, our best performance of the season, in my opinion. I know John will maybe argue for the Luton game. In my opinion, Burton, our best performance of the season by an absolute country mile of miles. Comment. Yeah, anyway, I'll come to that comment in a minute. But Burton, absolute best performance by a country mile. He played, I think, the full game, or certainly most of it. Wigan game, not going to say we were great, but we were worse than he came off. Wimbledon game, exactly the same story. I'm not going to say we were brilliant in the first 50 to 60 minutes of that game, but we were a darn sight better than we were in the last 30. Again, we were worse than he came off. Exeter, he didn't play a minute. We were terrible all game. Mansfield, we were better when he comes on. And I think it's actually quite rare, genuinely quite rare, that you see one player make that much of an impact on a team. And I think, it comes down to a lot of people, and this isn't, and I'm trying not to sound, look at me, I'm such a clever fan, I understand football, but I've had a lot of football fans really only value the kind of crunching defensive players who kind of slide in and put in, big Brexit tackles and win headers, or they value the, players who get 10 plus goals or assists this season. I think the players like McCabe, who control the tempo, control the possession, not just keeping the ball aimlessly, but recycling the ball to allow other players to move, recycling the ball to allow territory to be gained, incisive passes into space. Players like him are worth their weight in gold, and I can absolutely see why he's been called up to train in Thomas Tuchel's England squad. I absolutely think he's a player who England have their eye on as potentially being in and around England squads over the next 5-10 years. Comment coming up from Shane saying just like Rams at Bristol City, in the sense that, yes, how good he was disguised by how bad the team was. Shane, I couldn't agree more, but I think his McCabe potential, maybe not in terms of how good he is at the moment, potentially became even higher than Randall, because he's so good as he is, and he's only 20. I think he could be better than Randall.
I said it, and I stand by it when I was a panelist on the podcast the other week. Law McCabe is going to have a fantastic season on loan at West Bromwich Albion in the Championship next year, and we are going to sit here and we are going to be furious with it. Right, I'm going to move the conversation on because we're half hour in now, and I'm a little bit wary of people's relationships if they don't get to go and watch The Traitors at 9 o'clock. You will have seen it by now because it is literally everywhere. Earlier on this afternoon, Plymouth Argyle did release a statement from Paul Byrne. We're getting used to these after a defeat. Little statement comes out shortly after it. And it's from the incoming CEO, Paul Byrne, who actually doesn't take up his position for another 2 months, but has taken the time out to write to supporters.
But signed it off as Paul Byrne, chief executive, even though he's not yet executive.
Yeah. But has taken the time to write to us this afternoon, and I'm going to read it in its entirety, and then we'll give it, a little bit of chat before we move it on to Wickham and your questions and thoughts at the end. It says, "Hi everyone, after last night's game, I would like to talk to you all directly and address our current status. None of us, the board, Tom, staff, or the loyal Green Army, are comfortable with the start to our season. It has been a very disappointing start, and I think we all recognise that. I think there'd be a problem if they didn't. I feel that the club has been through an enormous period of instability, both on and off the pitch. We have seen too many changes of personnel, and this has made it difficult to find consistency in what we do. I believe strongly that we need to return to a state where we regain that consistency and therefore success. That will take time, but this is the right thing to do for our club and our future. In the case of our head coach, let me be more explicit. We hired Tom as a young, bright, ambitious head coach who could come and be a big part of Argyle's next phase. We are a quarter of the way into Tom's first season with us. Whilst results have been disappointing, nothing has changed in terms of Tom being the right person for this football club. We need to bring that stability throughout the club, and this comes from the head coach downwards." I'd argue it comes from the boardroom downwards, but we'll get onto that in a minute. We are confident that things will improve. We've had a number of circumstances which have hit us in recent weeks, resulting in key players being missing throughout the opening 14 league games. This was emphasised last night, with Tom unable to fill the substitutes bench, 9 players being unavailable for selection, with a vast majority considered first team starters. These are not excuses, but facts, said Rafa Benitez and Paul Byrne, 2025, and are clearly not ideal circumstances for any head coach to deliver consistent winning performances, but we believe Tom has all the tools to still deliver this. Throughout all of this, the support of the Green Army has never wavered, with continued sell-out home crowds and incredible away backings. This support is never taken for granted by anyone at the football club, especially Tom, his staff and the players. We are one Argyle. And as history has proven, when we are united, we can achieve special things. Let's stick together. Coig. That was Paul Byrne talking to supporters this afternoon via a club statement. Therefore, gents, I suppose my next task as host of the Green and White podcast is to ask you for your emergency podcast availability over the course of the next 2 weeks, because we usually know, John Alsop, what follows said statements when managers are under pressure.
Yes, they call it the dreaded vote of confidence for a reason, except I actually think they believe it. And I don't know, maybe every football club board believes a vote of confidence when they put one out. I'm sure there have been quite a few in their time that have used that as a way to, not so subtly indicate to a manager that they need to improve. Maybe that's what's happening here, but I just sort of think it fits in a bit with our kind of, the charitable word would be earnest, and maybe the less charitable word would be extremely naive, recent way of doing business. That this is seen as a kind of sincere expression of faith. Actually, there was, when you were reading out, it was interesting. There was sort of little like vocal things, sort of word choice things in there that I hadn't quite clocked before. A quarter of the way into Tom's first season with us being the bit that stood out to me, which I hadn't really clocked on the written, in terms of the, with the writing on the page, which suggests that whoever wrote that is at least subconsciously thinking in terms of, next season already, which is not necessarily the sort of language you would use if you had it in mind to sack someone within the next couple of games if things don't improve. So, and I think I've gone back and forth on this a little bit with Sam privately, as he will attest. But my initial instinct was that they really, really don't want to change the manager, that they really believe that we're not a sacking club, that has sort of had to change a little bit because of desperate circumstances in recent years. But they see this as being a project, and they are a bit realistic that it's not going to be immediately successful. I don't think that statement is unreasonable on its face. I think too many clubs do just chop and change managers. I think that the fact that we have cycled through, 4 managers since the departure of Schumacher has clearly not left us in a good place, right? Those managers have performed better and worse at different times, but they've all had different styles. They've all been different personalities. It has led to whiplash, and it has ultimately put us where we are, or contributed to putting us where we are. I think, given the amount of turnover among players as well, and also in terms of the non-playing staff at the boardroom level and all the rest of it, below, I get it. I think that the desire for stability is sincere. And I said on the pod a couple of weeks ago, there are young managers who look like they're a hopeless case and then come good because they learn about the game through doing it. And I think Johnny Jackson was the example I used. I think he had a pretty poor start to his spell in charge of Wimbledon. I don't believe that was his first job, was it? But he was still very early in his career, still a very young guy.
He was sacked from Charlton, so it kind of been actually quite comparable to Cleverley in one respect, of had a job in the league above that was not amazing but not terrible, got sacked from that job, and then got a job in the league below. So Jackson's from Charlton to Wimbledon, and then Cleverley from Watford to Argyle is actually reasonably comparable to that.
They stood by him. They've reaped the benefits of that. And I cannot sit here and say with absolute certainty or anything like it, that I don't think it's possible, very possible, that, you know, the sort of pundit class will be sat there in a year's time saying most clubs sack their managers, but Plymouth Argyle stood by Tom Cleverley and it was rocky for 6 months or whatever. But, you know, they turned it around and he's got some stability and you know, and he is working under very difficult circumstances, right? You know, I think the injuries, they are an excuse. Let's be clear. And I'm certainly not very impressed with that statement in the sense that he left his best player on the substitutes bench last night. I think there's a degree of like that kind of throwing away your entitlement to moan about that side of things. But those injuries are significant. Now, I think you could say what you like about the output of a Xavier Amici, for example. I don't think it's been what we hoped we would see from him in terms of him being a fantastic player at this level. But when you're in a relegation fight, not sort of looking at the difference between maybe 10th in the league and 6th in the league, I think players like him and Caleb Watts would be difference makers at that level of the table. So I think that it is reasonable to point to those injuries. And that's before we even get on to, you know, Julio Pleguezuelo, who I believe to be a championship standard player who we just haven't seen and won't for a while. Jack McKenzie, we haven't seen anything of him at all. You know, and just generally, again, it's that lack of stability that they allude to. Cleverley has to work under that. And I don't for 1 minute think he has had an easy job this season. That being said, you know, if you ask, I've sort of been asked by more cleverly out friends of mine to defend him, and I can't really do it at this point. You know, I can't really look at the team and say that they look well coached, or that they have a clear identity, or that they know what they're doing, or that there is something there. You know, I really did feel there was something there a few weeks ago. But if that was the case, then even if we were losing these games, you would hope to be able to see that kind of the progression of that identity, the kind of coaching, and maybe it would be going wrong and mistakes would be being made individually. You know, I could imagine a world in which we lost yesterday, conceding those 2 goals, and we come away going, you know, God damn it, the defending has let us down again. That's really terrible, and none of us are happy about this. But where we looked much more coherent and like we had a plan in between the boxes, and we didn't. You know, we had nothing. We looked clueless, absolutely clueless. I had a big rant earlier about Lorne McCabe. His team selections are baffling. He doesn't seem to have any clue what his best lineup is or what his best formation is. And I don't think that's just a question of injuries. You know, I think smart managers could look at the players who are out and can shape the players who are left into something that still reflects kind of more what they want to do than, well, I don't really like this formation, but, you know, I'm going to have to do it because I don't have this wide player. You know, there seems to be, it's sort of like a hyper adaptation where he is over adapting almost every single week to what went wrong the previous week or the injuries he has. But it sort of ends up not being adapting in any meaningful sense because he's overdoing it and therefore it doesn't actually fix any of the problems he wants to do. So, you know, I guess, yeah, I'm on the fence, which is a familiar position for me, of course, with splinters in my arse. I really, really, really profoundly want him to succeed. I think he seems like a nice, decent guy. I think he's an intelligent guy. I think there have been signs of promise in his fledgling managerial career, and some with us. And I do think that you cannot just go around sacking managers when the going gets tough. But there's the going getting tough, and there's being in a truly disgraceful league position, which is completely abysmal and unacceptable in a league that we, you know, don't want to be in and we want to get out of at the right end. And at some point, you have to put, you know, a price on that and say, well, when is enough enough? When are we actually in danger of going down? Not just a team that is in a relegation, because we are in a relegation fight. I mean, literally, factually, we are. But, you know, it's fine margins at this point. The season is young. You know, we only sacked Rooney on New Year's Eve last year, which is much later than now. And we still nearly stayed up. And that was in a much tougher league where we had a comparatively poor budget. Lots could change. But at what point do we have to say we are in real trouble and this is not getting any better? I personally am not there yet. I don't think I'm there yet because I think it's been too few defeats in a row. But the defeats that we've had in a row have been worst case scenario levels of abject performance. And yeah. Again, it's very hard to defend. So that's my sort of tortured take on it. I genuinely want to take the club at face value here, but it's they need to give me more to work with, and he needs to give me more to work with, I guess.
Sam, just very quickly, I'm going to come to you for probably no more than 2 or 3 minutes on the statement. I know that's sort of shrinking your allowable time, but we do have still plenty to get through, and I don't want to face the wrath of John's significant other. On that statement, we know obviously how I joked about emergency podcasts and how these things tend to pan out. They've almost set their stall out quite dramatically here, as John says, because the language within the statement means that if this is a perceived vote of confidence, that does go the way of 60% of all votes of confidence that football clubs put out on their social media channels, they're going to look very stupid after the statement they've just put out backing Tom Cleverley, aren't they? They could have done it a different way, but they are seriously behind this guy. Is that right or is that wrong in your opinion?
Honestly, no more stupid than it looked when Hallett said at Dennis Working Club that Rooney had all the tools to be a great coach and we were going to do what we can to help him and get him other staff in. And a few weeks later, it's all sorry, we've cocked up again. Let's all get behind the team. It's just rinse and repeat, isn't it, really? Let's be honest about it. It's the way it's going. I know John's chuckling and I'm being a bit sarcastic about it, but honestly, it wouldn't be any more stupid than we've looked in various other things over the past few weeks. I'm actually not reading into that we're not thinking of sacking him. I think John was right to pick up the point about the first season, but I think the other way that could be read is it could be read in the sense of, well, it's just his first season. If he'd done mediocre last season and then he started this season badly, we'd have more of a chance to get rid of him. That doesn't necessarily mean, I think, the way John's read it, that we envision him being here for many more seasons. I'm going to pick out another line that I think also has got a little bit under the radar, and the line is this. If I can find it. Here we go. So we had a number of the where the hell is it? It was something
fantastic
like,
audio content. This,
yeah, it was something like he should still be able to do better, but I literally can't find the wording of where it was. Right, we're confident things will improve. And a number of circumstances which have hit us in recent weeks, resulting in key players being missing. These are not excuses but facts. Here we go. Here it is. So it said, this is the crucial line for me 30 seconds later. But we believe Tom has all the tools to still deliver this. But we believe Tom has all the tools to still deliver this. So that, to me, is very much a little bit of a shot across the bows there, saying, despite all the above, we still believe Tom should be doing better. That's what it's explicitly saying there. And I think there's some aspect in what John's saying that they could be right, and maybe they are totally sincere and they're not even thinking about sacking him yet. But that, to me, is he's not doing as well as he should be. We are backing him, but that's not going to be backing him permanently or unconditionally. My read on that statement, and I'm going to be a bit mischievous and throw another thing into the mix. One of the main things when it was all going off about Rooney and even about Foster is the club said you've got to communicate one way or the other. You've either got to put out a statement in defence of him or you've got to sack him. Well, maybe they've just taken that literally. Maybe they've literally had a vote and said, are we going to vote to put out a statement or are we going to vote to sack him? And maybe the vote went the way of the former. But if that's the case, the fact they're even discussing it, the fact they're even saying, are we going to back him or sack him, says that the question, are we going to sack him, is still in the conversation. So I don't necessarily share the same read of this, that this is somehow a unimpeachable vote of confidence. I would lean more towards the reading that this is a more traditional vote of confidence, which means there's every chance that unless things pick up, he will be out the door in 3 or 4 weeks' time. I think he's got 3 or 4 games to show significant improvement, or he's done. That's my honest prediction. And I think, to be honest, he's lucky that he's not clearing his desk today, quite frankly.
Sam, I think we could both. I think that could play out in a world where, like, either of us is correct. I think there's a world in which they think that they are in for the long haul with this guy, but the fan pressure from 4 or 5 abject more defeats in a row just takes it out of their hands, or they blink. I could see a world.
I think they are genuinely giving him about 3 or 4 more games. That's my view on it, and I think they're, because otherwise I think that you wouldn't have included that line about. That line basically quite implicitly says he should still be doing better. And I don't think you'd include that line if you weren't at least thinking about it. So, there we go. We'll see. I think if it were down to me, I think he'd be clearing his desk today, to be quite frankly honest with you. I was tempted after the exit of the game to say it, but I think I am saying it now that I think this is time to go, unfortunately. I hear all the points about, lovely guy, very hardworking, very quite a clever guy, quite a well-spoken guy. And as I mentioned again privately to John earlier, I do actually wonder if he might, in this modern age of football where the head coach and the sporting director roles are separated, I do think he might be more suited to a director of football role. He's he's that calm-headed back office person, but is he a motivator? I don't know. We know he's a hard worker. We know he's up at 5 o'clock every morning. So was Rooney, but not in the same way. But we know he's always the first one in the building. But there we go. We'll see.
Yeah, I think that's probably time for you to put yourself on mute there, Sam, isn't it? You've rather embarrassed yourself a little bit. But look, I mean, in what Sam's point was about the conversations that have been going on, I was always given a very wise saying that I stick to and is still my mantra to this day. If you ask the question, you know what the answer is. And if that question was being asked, then unfortunately they know what the answer is. Who knows? Time will tell what is around the corner. What is around the corner is the Football Content Awards, and there are over 1,500 of you watching tonight's show. Thanks for that. We're sorry it's not in better circumstances. If you haven't done already, or even if you have done already, scan that QR code, visit argyle.life. If you can't, scan the QR code and vote for us in the Football Content Awards. It would mean a lot. And as a fan base, might give us something that we can all smile about in the next few weeks. One thing we might be able to smile about in the next few days is we are heading back to Adams Park in the first round of the FA Cup. They've had a bit of
anything to smile about.
They've had a bit of a upturn in form after they got a new head coach in who might have been available a few months ago and might have turned around other form as well. Very good head coach, very good guy. Oh well, what could have been, John? Michael Duff's Wickham lay ahead at the weekend. I've absolutely no idea what team we're going to put out. I have absolutely no idea who's going to be fit, who's going to be available. So we're not going to go into that sort of discussion. You've got 60 seconds each, lads. Where are we going in the second round of the Cup?
Honestly, I think having tried quite a long time with 4 at the back, having then transitioned to 3-4-3, then to 3-5-2, and now back to 3-4-3, I honestly just think at the moment, if we are going to go down the route of giving Cleverley a few more games, then given that basically none of the formations are really working to any lesser or greater extent, I think we may as well just go back to the one that he wants to play, which is 4 at the back. I never thought I'd say that after the improvement of September, particularly after the Burton game where we totally outplayed them. But I honestly think, given it's basically nothing's working, we may as well at least try the thing that he ideally thinks would work, all else being well. And I think we've got Jamie Patterson. We've got the player who can play one of those attacking systems. I think, thank you for that comment, Zach, along the screen. We've got Owen Dale, who I think in an attacking sense had a pretty decent game yesterday. As long as he learns not to kick balls away when he's on a yellow card, he'll be okay. So I think 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1, and that again having one less centre back means one less chance of seeing Wiradoo playing there. Quite bluntly, which I think is probably an advantage. And obviously allows a few options at right back, Such or Edwards or Sorinola. Left back, hope maybe Mackenzie might be fit sometime before the heat death of the universe. If not, then Galloway, I guess, or even Mumba. Who knows? Yeah, obviously Dale, Tolai, Patterson. As Richard said, I probably would agree with that. If it is a 4-3-3, I'd probably go with that as the front three, with probably McCabe, Boateng, and Ibrahim if he's fit. Maybe give Roberts another go. If not, I think I didn't mention him as one of the 4 who deserved credit, but I do think he was probably the best of the rest outside of that 4. He had some bad moments, some good moments. He had a couple of moments where he actually made some quite nice passes into space, but had a couple where he gave it away sloppily. So, yeah, maybe Roberts if Ibrahim isn't fit, alongside McCabe and Boateng, and back 4 probably Edwards or Sorinola. I think Such has to be dropped after that. He had a really poor game. Edwards, Ross, maybe Alex Mitchell if he's ready. If not, then maybe just put Such centre back and give him a reprieve. Ross with one of Such or Mitchell, with Galloway or Mackenzie or maybe Mumba at the left back is probably how I'd play out.
Sam, while you're unmuted, what's the goal score going to be?
I'm going to say we're going to do a bit better because I think we can't have 3 performances in a row, surely it's as bad as that, even after the Norwich and Bristol City. Although we lost to Swansea, it was certainly a much improved performance on the 2 that came before. So I do think we will pick up a bit. I think it'll be 1-1 at normal time. And I think Wickham will win 2-1 after extra time.
Oh, yeah, we got all that nonsense, haven't we? Because Chelsea want to go off and play in North America in June. John, you're going to the game. Sam's left you about 15 seconds to talk about it. Just give us your tuppence before we go through the comments that I've left for everybody.
Yeah, basically, don't really care who plays, don't really care what happens particularly. I think he needs to play his best team, what he thinks his best team is, rather than kind of chop and change for the sake of it or for, keeping players fit. I think that's a luxury we can't afford at the moment. We need to, develop a winning habit. And when I say I don't care who plays, what I mean is I think he needs to make that decision because he clearly doesn't know what he thinks his best team is. So he needs to think about that and decide that based on what he wants, not based on what I would want. And just try and tell the players the pressure's off. We don't really care about what happens here. We don't care about having a cup run. Go out, take it seriously, try and reward the fans, and just try and get back to winning ways without the crushing sense that we'll be mired further in the relegation zone if we don't. Because I do think there's a chance that these players actually do really care and they're just weak psychologically. And so anything that we can sort of do to make them see that this is not a particularly important game and no one really is bothered by it is sort of about going out there and proving to yourselves that you can do it. Hopefully that can help. In terms of the result, the most Argyle possible result, which I think is we'll go there and win 1-0 and we'll look really good and really tight and everyone will come away saying, that was a lot better, wasn't it? And then, I don't know. We'll see what happens the weekend after that. But it just seems to me like this is one that it would just not surprise me at all if we pick up the win after 2 games where it was much, 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 much more important to win and we couldn't do it.
I can't see us winning this. I'll be honest. I try and be positive if I can, but
Shock as chair of the Michael Duff fan club suggests that we are not going to beat a Michael Duff team.
I think it will be a tactical masterclass. I'm not going to go down that route. But I just think sometimes the cup run can obviously spark us into life a little bit. We've seen the Virtu trophies done wonders at times to get a win in the league swiftly after it. I can't see this going our way. But look, I'm happy to be proven wrong. Let's hope by 5 o'clock we are still in the pot to be drawn out on Monday night. I did ask in the comments for people to give an idea of how we can fix this.
We could be in the pot at 5 and not at 6, to be clear.
Wow, very true. Very true. I did ask people to give us their thoughts on how we could turn it around going to Huddersfield in 10 days' time. How do we change things around? Harry McSherry on YouTube says nothing will change. We can't do the basics. Devonport Green says the players don't care. They're a disgrace. I'm sick to my back teeth of this crap every week. We'll be battered at Huddersfield next week. Club is a shambles from the boardroom down. Tell us how you really feel, Devonport Green. Lewis Knight says change the shape 4-3-3, Holder in front of the back 4. Also that statement today. Wow. Barn Park Green says Wiradoo should never play centre back, only ever play holding midfield now with Boateng. Just a couple of questions for you lads as well.
I'd have ended that message after 4 words personally.
Just a couple of questions for you as well, Sam. These don't need massive elaborations. Tim Yarnold asks, though, has Tom played his last game at Home Park? I'd say he's played his last game.
Yeah, I was going to say he's retired. I think he did in Plymouth nil Watford 1.
September 09 he got the winning goal for Watford against us when he was there on loan for Man United. Yeah.
Has he played it? Has he managed his last game at Home Park?
Honestly, I think quite possibly. Based on my answer to the earlier question, I don't think this is them saying we're going to give him infinity time. I think this is them saying you've got a few games to back up. Zimbabwe have arranged some friendlies during the November international break. Since we last mentioned it. So it is now looking more likely that Bradford game will be called off. And I think Bradford have a few call-ups as well. So there's every chance we're going to have the next run of games, obviously Wickham away, Huddersfield away, Bristol Rovers away in the Virtu Trophy. Then we're looking at potentially a gap and then Port Vale away. And honestly, I think if we've not picked up a win in any of them, you know, or even if we just won the Bristol Rovers nonsense and nothing else, and we're still not looking any better, then I think he may be gone before the Northampton game, honestly. I do.
Kenny Pasta sent in a comment earlier. Despite the statement, do you find it strange we haven't heard from Simon despite his commitment to update every 3 months? The last time we heard from him was May. That is not strictly true. If you head over to oceancityradio.co.uk and you go on previous episodes, you can find an interview with me on the Ocean City Radio Sports Show before the Stockport game, or after the Stockport game, I should say, with Chairman Simon Hallett. It's a very good hour-long interview, if I do say so myself.
He also did a fans
the
forum.
fan forum, I guess, as well. Yeah,
so he did a fans forum a lot more recently than that. So
I guess it really depends what he actually meant by update every 3 months. Was that a commitment to a chairman chat statement I don't know. I'd have to read the particulars of what he promised before criticising him on that particular point.
But actually, the interview with the Ocean City Radio Sports Show came after the fans forum, so that was his last interview. So do catch that if you can. Captain Charisma Y2J asks on YouTube, can we recall Wright, Ogbeta, and even Beidou? Well, I was told earlier on today that we can't do it until January the 1st. I'd absolutely recall 2 of them. Any objections to recalling certainly Wright and Ogbeta, maybe even Beidou?
I mean, the biggest potential issue is if we don't have a recall clause in the contract, then essentially we don't have any means of, we can't then just snap our fingers and recall them. We could, of course, come to an agreement with Wigan or Barnsley for a settlement of the loan. Of course, we could do that, but that means us essentially paying money to buy our own players who are going to be out of contract in 6 months anyway. So maybe, yeah. Maybe
the club are very good about writing clauses into contracts, though. So I imagine it's fine.
Last but not least, John VW Coco asks, could there be a chance that Borough recall McCabe in January and resend him out on loan to a lower Championship club or a top end of League One club? We're used to this.
Don't know what the
my immediate question would be: has he played for them in like a League Cup game? Because then it could be the 3 teams in the season rule, but I'm not sure if he has or not.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. Don't know what the terms are. Could I see a world in which he keeps getting left on the bench and they decide to recall him and send him somewhere who will actually play him? Yes, I could see that happening. But yeah, I hope it doesn't. With that, Joe, I think I need to go and watch a trio, including Ross, that's actually basically competent in a minute. So if we could hurry this up.
Well, I wonder whether superintendent is actually your other half, John, because the comment just said
that'd be a good twist, but no.
Exclamation mark. Gents, that's it, because I'm now being told by everybody that Traitors has started, and John values his relationship. Join us again on Sunday night post Wycombe Wanderers in the FA Cup, when hopefully we'll be talking in better circumstances. Until then, for Christ's sake, just smile and just get out of the house, get some fresh air, because there's worse things that happen at sea. Night all.